Now let's go to the Federal Reserve System. You know when I said you need to have military power, you need to have technology, and you need to have a strong banking system. Now let's look at the biggest joke of what they call nowadays, or they've been calling it for a very long time, as a Federal Reserve Bank. There is no such thing. It's a nonsense. In 1907, the US economy was in a great financial crisis. In November 1910, 6 men, Nelson Aldrich, A. Piatt Andrew, Henry Davison, Arthur Shelton, Frank Vanderlip, and Paul Warburg. Now, Paul Warburg was a Rothschild's agent. Later became second vice chairman of the Federal Reserve from 1916 to 1918. He was the vice chairman of the entire Federal Reserve Bank of America, an agent of Rothschild. Met at the Jekyll Island Club. Has anyone heard of Jekyll Island Treaty? Yes? At the Jekyll Island Club off the coast of Georgia to write a plan to reform the nation's banking system. Now listen to this. Amazing. The meeting and its purpose were closely guarded secrets. And participant did not admit that the meeting occurred until the 1930s. This took place in 1913. In Jekyll Island, it took place in 1913. They did not confess of this secret meeting until the 1930s, 20 odd years later. But the plan written on Jekyll Island laid a foundation for what would eventually be the Federal Reserve System. On the 23rd of December 1913, President Woodrow Wilson passed the Federal Reserve Act. Maybe you missed it, the date, 23rd of December. What does that tell you? What is 23rd of December close to? What happens on Christmas time? Everyone goes? Congress was on holidays. Did you know this act that was passed by President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, did you know he passed it based on 3 people getting together 2 days before Christmas, where everyone from the Congress was on holidays? 3 people signed it, one of them the agent of Rothschild, Warburg. And Woodrow Wilson, being a member of the Round Table, of course, what will he do? He will endorse it. He passed the act, and it became an act. It wasn't an act. Actually, it was an act, as in acting, a theatrical act. I think I'll get into trouble now. The final bill closely resembled those of the Aldrich Plan. Federal Reserve Act allowed international bankers, look at this. This Federal Reserve Act, which President Woodrow Wilson passed and endorsed, it allowed international bankers to control a nation's economy, which played a key role in lending money to finance the world wars. International bankers took over the Federal Reserve Banks of almost every country. To do what with these banking system? To create war and then fund those countries with money, and then that country becomes in debt so far and so deep, then they'll come and say, you can't pay it? That's okay, my darling. We will write off this, but we are free to do whatever we want to do in your country. So who is the Federal Reserve Bank? Freemason. This chairman, the other day he was brought to investigation in front of a board. Can they stop acting? Because not everyone is blind. You guys in parliament, wherever you are, not everyone is blind. So please stop deceiving and stop treating people this way. Have some respect for yourselves. There is no Federal Reserve Bank. There is nonsense of investigation. You did not have to raise interest rates. You did not have to do all these nonsense. You know very well it's a plan. You see, they reduced the interest rate to less than 2%. Wow, unheard of. The Federal Reserve interest rate was almost zero. It was 0.1. We've never seen this in Australia for a very long time. So what happened? Everybody went by and started buying house properties. It's a very low rate. Let's take advantage of it. So everybody went, whatever cash they had, they put it as a deposit, or those who borrowed from the bank to the maximum, and the banks all of a sudden became so friendly and so easy to lend. We'll lend you 95, 97, 98, 100% if you want, no problems, but we'll get you 2 years later. So everybody invested, and after that they said, okay, millions of people bought second, third, and the first house, and now it is really hot, so let's start raising the rate, saying inflation is high. Get a life, you liars. So they started increasing the rate, and now he comes and he says, you know what, we have a group of people who are on fixed rate about to expire. Those ones will feel the pinch, but we've been told by the major banks, who are all liars, we've been told by the major banks that this percentage of people who are on fixed rate, who will struggle once their fixed rates are expired, it's a very minute percentage compared to the overall borrowers. Federal Reserve Bank is not federal, is not a reserve bank, is not owned by no government. It's Freemason owned, including America, the number one. That happened in America. They took over, and the Federal Reserve System in America, they took it over. The bankers had been waiting since 1887 for the United States to enact a central bank plan so that they could finance a European war among the nations whom they had already bankrupted with armament, military weapons and equipment, and defense programs. The most demanding function of the central bank mechanism is war finance. You want to destroy a country? Create a war and lend them money, because they need money to keep the war happening and then control that country.